Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today we're going to ponder whether iteratively replacing the systems you have traps you in legacy frameworks and if that's actually a bad thing. So, as an example, in my day job, I'm working with a PHP system that has evolved organically since the aughts, and it predates ORMs
Mm-hmm.
like Laravel. And so it doesn't use Laravel, and it's got a whole lot of homegrown ORM logic because, again, it predated it. And if you were going to do a rewrite, you would obviously, even if you stuck with PHP, you would use something like Laravel,
Yeah.
and it would be better than what we have and all of its quirks. But if I'm going to iteratively improve what I have, I would probably never get to the point, or I am iteratively improving what I have, but I will probably never get to the point where I'm going to replace the homegrown ORM with Laravel because it is good enough at, that it probably doesn't ever make sense. And so my question
Hmm.
is that a problem and is that a negative aspect of our theory that we should thesis ship and not do a rewrite?
Got a couple of thoughts there on this one then. Um, it depends. Right. Um, so my first thought is like, yeah, as you're iterating, if you're trying to make the smallest changes that are deliverable and just
Mm-hmm.
keep delivering value to the customer, the smaller the change, the less likely you are to introduce something new like Laravel or some other kind of way to move forward. Um, so yeah, the tools you're probably going to work in the ecosystem you've got to do as much improvement as you can. But I imagine, I guess, where my brain leads with this is at some point you'll get diminishing returns of those DC shipped values
Mm-hmm.
on the smaller things to the point where okay, you really do need to DC ship something bigger that's being blocked by maybe your current framework, something that would be easier to deliver in Laravel,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe it's a security thing where your old homegrown PHP thing before Laravel existed was your own built login system with flaws, and you're like, well, and everyone says you shouldn't roll your own security stuff. We should
Sure.
probably
Yep.
use Laravel's security thing, and at some point, you might hit that pain point where it's like, we really need to be using a modernized version of this, and the auditing or something has gotten to the point where like, okay, this is important enough that this thesis shipped piece needs to be a bigger thesis shipped piece. So
I'm not sure I agree with that because to me, it would be, well, in the case I'll hate on the code that I'm working now, it doesn't have, it's tightly coupled code with no clear boundaries. And if I was to push towards a Laravel, like if I wanted to iterate towards Laravel, right, it's like, oh, the homegrown ORM is holding me back. I would be iteratively moving to actually, having a persistence layer and a
yeah.
presentation layer and having an MVC and all of the three, n tier architecture inside my service. And by the time I got close to that, as I iterate towards that, which is a good thing anyway, because it will reduce bugs and make it easier to iterate and implement things and iterate. As I get closer to that, then making the jump to Laravel becomes smaller and smaller,
Mm-hmm.
because if I have an actual data tier in my system, then in theory I could cut over to using Laravel as my data tier, and the changeover I could then thesis ship it because now I'm replacing my homegrown ORM model mapping with Laravel ORM
Mm-hmm.
model mapping, and the two could live side by side for a significant amount of time.
So I don't disagree with that. I guess what you're pitching is essentially what I'm getting to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't see them as like conflicting. So oh, continue.
Well, so I think the conflict is, does that invalidate the premise of what I was saying? Of, has the fact that I've started with iterative development, is that blocking me from using newer technologies, or is that just an internal handicap of, well, your developers might think that, but you have to remind them that they don't have to stay there, right? I don't have to stay
Mhm.
with my homegrown ORM, even though it would just be easier forever. I could.
Yeah, I think neither in this case. I think that
Hmm.
you can essentially, because of the thesis shipping pattern or just like the Strangler Fig pattern, you
Mm-hmm.
can still use a separate uh, framework, whether it's PHP or whatever you want to use beside your current system,
Mm-hmm.
and iteratively ship and move things towards this new framework without it being a big bang rewrite. You can take certain parts of it and go, okay, we're going to stand up Laravel, this other thing that we're wanting to move, or Laravel provides a certain optionalities
Mm-hmm.
that's better or just clean over the ORM layer. We can go ahead and set that up next to this, and if we hit this particular route, that route we're going to soft launch it to route to this Laravel layer. So
Mm.
only this particular route will do that, and then slowly over time you're going to move that route over, like the Strangler Fig pattern suggests, until you've got a new kind of like maybe like a new API layer, and eventually you're moving things over piece by piece, where it's still thesis shipping. You
Mm-hmm.
still get the option to use a new tool, and it doesn't. I don't think it invalidates any of the ideas on never rewrite. I think that's still iterative. That is still like by definition iterative shipping in smaller pieces.
Okay, so I think what you're saying here is iterative development doesn't prevent you from using new frameworks. It requires you to be more intentional.
Mm-hmm.
While a Big Bang rewrite, when you start off in a green field, you get to use the new framework immediately,
Mm-hmm.
and you get all the benefit right up front. You get that huge rush of, oh, I'm working with new technology, new things. It's great.
Yeah.
And if you have to iterate your way there, you have to be very intentional,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very delayed gratification of, well, I have to do all this work, and then it will be very easy for me to use this new framework, but it won't be very interesting because I already did all the necessary groundwork to get there. And by the time I get to this new framework, it's just going to be the grind part.
Yeah. I think that's. I mean, imagine if you had like, you were working on a dashboard for a little while, and the dashboard was pulling analytics in a
Mm-hmm.
different way. Instead of it using, in like your old method, which might be slow, or pulling the data might be slow, having just the dashboard use a new thing
Mm-hmm.
and slowly build that thing and route maybe even just one widget on the dashboard to use that thing to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make a huge project out of it. Just like stand up what you need, be intentional, plan, okay, well, what are my constraints? Why do I need to do this? Can I not solve it in the old system? Are we sure we
Mm-hmm.
can't solve it in the old way? Okay, we have to solve it in this way. That there's your forcing function right there, right? This problem cannot be solved in your old framework. So at that point, you're not doing it because it's fun or because you hate the old system. You're doing it because there's a business constraint forcing you to use a different technology. And then you're delivering the smallest piece possible, just the widget that needed the data that you can't pull in your way. And that widget will now fetch from some new thing. And I think that's a
Sure.
thesis shipped approach.
Counter argument, though, not it's not a counter argument, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
problem with this argument. What is to stop this from becoming a sort of metastasized, cancerous problem where team one says, hey, we're going to use Laravel, and they start a small thesis shipping project using Laravel. So now I have homegrown ORM and Laravel, so I have two. And then team team B says, oh, I don't like Laravel. I want to do the same thing. I don't know any other PHP ORMs, but let's assume they're going to use PHP ORM as made up name.
Mm-hmm.
And so Team A is going with a Laravel migration. Team B is going with a different ORM migration. And we'll say that neither team is aware of each other.
Yeah.
So now I've got three ORMs in my system. And now I'm working towards this mess, and people can give up. And so if either team gives up, then now I've got this thing that's different than the rest of my code. And have I made things worse?
Mm. Well, I think the key part of your argument that kind of like makes it somewhat contrived is you said
Yes.
none of the teams know about or communicate with each other. So I think, yeah, if none of your teams are communicating with each other, you're going to make a mess anyway. Regardless of if it's a coding problem.
Fair enough. That's what Austin was talking about. All your tech debt is really communication problems. But let's
Yeah.
say they
Is
are
there?
talking about it, talking to each
Mm-hmm,
other, and they agree that each team is going to do a experiment, and
mm-hmm.
then we'll figure out which way we want to go.
Yeah.
And so Team A and Team B do their experiments, and whichever way they decide to go, you still then have to redo one piece of work to get the other system out. Like you still then have to be very intentional to get the other piece of the system out
Yeah.
to redo the experiment that didn't win.
I mean, yeah, having to redo something. I don't know if that's necessarily a problem. I mean, it's lost work, but again, you kind of keyed on something important there, which
Small
which you
amount.
have to be intentional about it. So if everyone is communicating about it,
Mm-hmm.
then that's good. But you essentially saw kind of a whole culture around this with microservices, which is
Mm-hmm.
essentially this, right? Each team's like, okay, we need a microservice for this, and they all have control of this their team, so I can build my own microservice in the way that I see fit, using the technology that I see fit.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, companies made that work. They're like, okay, well, sorry, for this team, you just have to realize that we're using Nest.js for the micro framework, whereas that team's using Lumen. You know, uh, and it really depends on like if your team has full control over that, that's maybe not necessarily a bad thing. If you don't have a bunch of PHP developers and everyone's using JavaScript for frameworks, maybe communication's better because you want to use frameworks that your developers are experienced in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't know that necessarily. Just I think if teams are communicating well and they have good intentions around what they design, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for someone to experiment with frameworks and to decide, okay, this was a good experiment. You know, I'm going to keep it versus this is a bad one. We're going to have to redo some of this work because that's just
Well,
MVP in general.
remember, an experiment is successful if if it gets you the answer, if it answers the question you're looking for. So I think this framework
Yeah,
might be interesting, and you do it, and it turns out the framework is not interesting. That was a
that's
successful
a
experiment.
successful. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't necessarily think rework or losing time is bad if you've got an answer and you're
Hmm.
moving forward with, okay, now we know what not to do. That's great.
Right.
Okay, cool.
That's
At least we
fair.
didn't go in a bad direction. You know.
Um, I want to walk through the timelines of the intentionality stuff because I think it's an interesting point.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are thesis shipping and you're being intentional, you say, okay, I'm going to bring in a new framework, prove it, then I'm going to strangle out the old framework, right? So then
Mm-hmm.
you have to be very intentional. Release after release, you have to move part of this thing forward. You have to strangle, fig, strangler
Yeah.
fig, right? Um, and so you have to be very intentional. You have to do it incrementally, release after release. And if you stop at any point, like if you give up, then you'll just have two services. There are two versions going, which will create its own nest of problems over time. The other way, right? If you do a rewrite, then you have the original system going as it is
Mm-hmm.
for an indeterminate amount of time. And then at some point, you still have the new system, which has none of the stuff on it. It's ready to go, but you still have to you still have to do a Strangler Fig type pattern or a giant Big Bang
Mm-hmm.
release. So if you're doing the Strangler Fig type pattern for your release, then I think the rewrite would be inferior in all ways.
Yeah.
And if you're doing the Big Bang rewrite, then it could theoretically be better because the intentionality forces you to get everything done. But the reality is damn near impossible.
I think the intentionality is carrying a lot of weight in in some of these arguments here. I think if there's intentionality
Intentional.
to do the strangler fig pattern
Mm-hmm.
iteratively, then you'll also not just give up on that approach, right? In that case too, like the the good thing about doing it that way, to me, is if you are doing the Strangler Fig pattern correctly, then at the point your functionality exists in the new system, you sunset it in the old one. So that functionality no longer exists in your original system. You don't have two systems in which you'd have to fix bugs in two different places while you're still trying to rewrite, right? In this case, you're building a new system and the old one just doesn't exist anymore. All fixes go in the new system related to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I still think that approach is still iterative approach is still much more superior in that way. And if we're using the term intentionality as broad as we are, then in this case, you just have the intention to continue slowly moving pieces over. And having them run next to each other, having two systems, in that case, I don't think the two system argument is part of our argument for never rewriting. It's one of the main flaws.
Mm-hmm.
But having two systems by itself isn't a bad thing. It's having two systems while being forced to do fixes in both systems. That's what really kills you. So I think in this approach, we've evaded that one negative argument of the dual system complaint.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
I like the way you think. We should do a podcast together.
We should.
All right. I think we are done here. So the answer seems to be no. Working iteratively does not prevent you from getting in newer frameworks, and it doesn't lock you into using your legacy tools. You can still do it, and you can still do it, and it will still be better than if you try to do a greenfield rewrite, starting over using the new tools.
I think so. That's my opinion on it, yeah.
Yeah, I thought I was going to come around the other way, but you have convinced me.
Good.
Yes.
We should throw it in the book.
Book coming soon. Well, not coming soon, but we are working on it, and it is getting longer by the day. So, pre-order now.
Neverrewrite.com. Get your pre-order today. Free updates for life.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
And I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.